Welcome to Happiness in the City. This is Barbara, and I'm just so glad we have this time to talk about search for goodness. And search for knowledge is goodness, because knowledge in itself comes from God. He gives us the information about how he created the universe. So we cannot grasp the whole thing because he's our Father, but we can connect through the image of God within us to beautiful things, noble things, divine things, wonderful things. Today I'd like to talk about a very important concept that all of you are familiar with. You all read history, some basic history, some college level, some even very sophisticated university level history, and we all encountered the concept of crown. What is crown? And after all of those years of education in political science, I took this concept for granted. And then my nephew asks me bluntly this question: Auntie, what is the crown? What is crown? And I realized that this is a topic that is much more complex than the intuitive understanding that I had, because this particular concept is information and knowledge, but also is connected with the image of God, who is our Father, who has the crown of creation. So he's the foundation of the very concept of king, crown, because he is running kingdom of God as king. So kingdom of God is run by somebody who has the crown. And we are in the image of God, so we are connected to his crown. Now, many of you who study philosophy know about St. Augustine, who wrote a book about this topic called City of God. And I encourage you to read that book and to reflect on what is in that book. And obviously there's a second amazing philosopher that wrote about the crown in the context of Christian tradition, Thomas Aquinas. And his books are very enlightening. This is knowledge that stimulates your own intellect and your own mind. And our minds are structured and created to know the concept of a crown. Of course, this is a complex concept, and there are many ways in which the concept of a crown can be understood. Let's look at Wikipedia, and I encourage you to read this wonderful encyclopedia of internet. So there are several articles on that topic. Let me start with a very simple first definition, that crown may refer to monarchy and government. And right here we have a very powerful explanation for what a crown is. So, some countries are organized as monarchies, and they have governments. The monarchy and the government are connected. Some people think it's the same thing, but it really is more complicated than that. Let's take example of Scandinavian countries: Sweden, Norway, Denmark. They are three monarchies, and they have governments that are run like democracies. So many people thought that the reason those governments are so caring for their nations is because they are socialist. But actually, the idea of the crown caring for every member of a given nation country is an ancient concept of a crown. So thinking in presence of the crown in monarchy of those countries influences the government's policy making. All European countries have heritage of monarchy, and then the governments were developed during the times of monarchy, and when monarchy became invisible in many countries, the governments continued the traditions that the crown had taught them for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And this is the key of a lot of confusion, because people think that the government, let's suppose the government of France, can be manipulated into thinking outside of the focus to care about French nation. But the way the government of France developed is so grounded on the crown that had existed in this country till the French Revolution. I'm talking about visible crown with visible king and queen. So all of that tradition, more than 1,000 years of tradition of Christian monarchy in France, defined the very nature of the government. So even when people got rid of the visible king and queen of France, the government continued and developed policies that are in harmony and consistent with the spirit of France. And this is the third aspect of the crown, the spirit of the nation, the spirit of the crown, the spirit of the government. Many people think that it can be easily manipulated, but spirit is connected to heart, and heart is connected to generations and generations of people created in a given place, in a given nation. So, certain policies can be manipulated, but the heart has certain ways. The spirit of a particular place has a certain way, and distorting it, deforming it, can be a very risky business. And we saw a lot of pain that developed in Europe when European nations created European Union, and then some people wanted to remove the sovereignties of particular nations and create an entity that is controlled by Brussels. And now we have a lot of rebellion in many countries over this. And why this project will fail is because people in Brussels want to ignore the fact that even those countries like Poland or Germany or France or Italy, Switzerland and others, even if they don't recognize visible crown, the governments are crown. The governments developed over more than 1,000 years with the concept of care for the whole nation. And those institutions were consolidated and have memory and have influence on understanding of particular nations. So if I were to advise European Union, in order for European Union to be successful, I would say, please create an office that has knowledge about sovereignties of all the member states, and then respect the traditions and the heritage of those nations. One of the countries that is most complicated in terms of the relationship between monarchy and government is Russia. Russia has been Christian monarchy since Kievan Rus became Christian. And by the way, if you visit that city is beautiful. You know that God's presence has been there and never left. It's the divine beauty of the city that is very blessed by God Himself, a living memorial to the crown history of Russia. During the revolution, seemingly the end to life of Nicholas II and Alexandra, his wife, was the finality of the monarchy in Russia. But history proved otherwise, because the elimination of the bearers of the crown did not eliminate the government of Russia. And the government of Russia continued under Lenin and under Stalin, and until today we have a president in Russia, Vladimir Putin. The Russian government is the crown. So the ignorance of people who thought that by eliminating the visible signs of divine leadership in Russia, that it was going to end Russia, it proved wrong, because the crown over more than 1,000 years got so embedded and so grounded in the institutions of the government, which is not only offices, it's also about thinking in government, relationships between government and the people, and the relationships between the government and other nations. So we have a situation in America. People run around talking about how great it is to be a democracy, and it's really not true that America is a democracy, because America is a republic, commonwealth, shared wealth, and it developed from European ideas about relationship between the crown and the people, and the wealth of the crown and the wealth of the people. So yes, there was transformation at the end of the 18th century from British crown to American government, but the American government developed as a crown. And it has within itself nobility to serve all people. And then, of course, those of you who study political science can get into deep dimensions of this. So, American government is Crown of America. Presidents are elected, representatives are elected, judges are appointed, there's complexity of law enforcement, there is complexity of security services and defense, but the government itself, in all its ways, is classical governmental crown that comes from European traditions, from the tradition of Israel, from the tradition of Kingdom of God, that has been a model for nations for last 2,000 years, since Jesus Christ, since Anno Domini, times that revealed the existence and the reach of Kingdom of God to all people of mankind, to all generations, past, present, and future. Why is it very important for us to understand the concept of the crown in relationship to government? It's because of the finances and financial aspects of institutions that are responsible for nurture and nourishment of the whole nation, of the whole country, of the whole people of a country in terms of empires, also many peoples on a given territory of a particular crown government. So we have to have knowledge about that topic, and I'm only beginning to talk about it because I think that it's very important for us to have clarity in understanding over the nature of a particular government and nature of other types of organizations within the concept of a country. There is some confusion today. People think that a private organization, a private corporation can substitute a government. Then it would not have the tradition of government as an institution caring for the whole nation. It would not have the nature of government as a crown. So it would only be responsible for a limited number of people or interests that concerns that particular corporation. The crown, by definition, concerns the whole people, the whole country, and how it is done is always to be determined by particular generation of office holders, of politicians, lawyers, people connected with these people who participate in elections. They have a voice in shaping particular nature of a government, but the foundation and the idea of a government that cares for everybody within its borders is a very noble, very beautiful, very uplifting concept. So when we have today's situation, which, let's suppose I take the American government, so quickly and beautifully helping Texas after a disaster of Hurricane Harvey. This is a role of a very noble, beautiful government helping people in need from the resources of the crown, of the royal government, of the government. In other words, we have to understand that the money that is connected to the government has the purpose to provide for shared needs of the whole nation. That money cannot be controlled by a different country or by funds that have focused on investments or futures incomes. There is place for such organizations, but the government as a crown of a nation, crown jewel of the nation, has to have an independent status and shape, and the money that this governmental crown controls are primarily to be spent on the needs and interests of a particular nation that depend on that government. So in terms of the direction of money, American money should have that multidimensionality of the government money and private money. And the government money, the crown money, has to be grounded to help American people. Likewise, in Germany, German crown government helping German people, Polish crown government helping Polish people, Russian crown government helping Russian people, etc., etc. When you understand that this concept of the government is a noble, beautiful institution that includes everybody in the nation, and that means financial support, then we will end up in a situation that members of a particular crown government will develop perceptions of nobility and love and beauty to each other. In America, we have a lot of pain caused by racial suffering, and the only way is to create love in all races to each other. Perception of love that can only come from the government crown that looks at everybody with equal power of love. We learn that from God, because that's what God does to all his creatures. God is love. He loves all his creation. When we have a situation in which people are encouraged to perceive each other with love, when you have a situation in which people believe they belong to the government crown, to the crown of their own government, when they have the perception that their neighbors are there with them, that they belong together to this beautiful entity and institution that has mission to care for them, that is the beginning of neighborly love. And this is what we need. Maybe in many ways we need a miracle of love in the perceptions of each other's being. But it's possible. Now, if the government starts dissociating itself from the people as a nation or as empire in some countries, then many people within a country feel they don't belong to anybody. They feel homeless, they feel abandoned. And that starts creating strife and holes and emptiness within the way governments function. So I think that as much as we love to have political divisions, they would be very destructive if we do not develop a connection at a higher level than political disagreements. And that high level connection should be understanding that the nature of the crown government has to be asserted and affirmed in praise. Today, too many governments are focused on punishing people. And that creates divisions too, because that breaks the heart of people who are members of a particular nation, and they expect the government to nurture and nourish them, to help them with their own businesses, family businesses, international relations. But people have within them that expectation that governments should have clarity of what the virtue is, that laws should not be so complicated that they cannot be understood. We have to have that foundation of praise again, praise and fame of the nation that is promoted by the government. We have Hollywood. Hollywood understands that. They have many events with awards in achievement of particular genres, but the government doesn't really have that. So many people started associating crown governments with fear of being punished. And I think that we need to develop a place in the governments that has promotion of affectionate, loving connection between the government and the nation. And punishment should only be for really horrible things, and it should not be used as routine method of disciplining the nation. Because when governmental nobility and beauty disappears and government becomes a tool of punishment that destroys the heart of the nation. And when the heart of the nation is destroyed, it's over. So we need to return to the understanding about the nature of governments that is reflecting the nature of God's government and kingdom of God. God is love. God is not using punishment as his way. God is using direction and love. He sent his son, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, embodiment of love, to the earth to show us the way. And discipline that God uses is only for something very serious, something clearly a crime. But God never calls love crime or crime love. He never misplaces those two concepts, because he warns us, don't call good evil and evil good. So, in order for us to return to peace in the nation, in the country, we have to have clarity of understanding of the duties and the nature of governmental authority, grounded in the notion of history of royal crowns, with intent to promote nobility